I would like to welcome Rooijen, the Chief E-commerce Officer at Chalhoub Group. Rooijen has been leading 60 e-com platforms and a team of 150 people across trade products and growth operation and analytics. Rooijen's joined Chalhoub from Dyson, where he was a Chief Data Officer, and prior to that working at Google, and has completed his Master of Science at Oxford University and Data IQ, actually repeatedly called one of the most intellectual data people at the data businesses. That's
I clearly
amazing.
need to check what the comms team sends before they send it. It is all true. It's just awkward hearing it like that. Guys, such a pleasure to be here. Inshallah تكونوا بخير. أنا سعيد بوجودي هنا معكم اليوم.
Wow.
شكرا.
That's amazing. I have no idea what you said, but salam alaikum.
That's because my pronunciation is very bad. I have too many Lebanese friends according to my Emirati ones and according to my, so it's never right.
Also, my Arabic's rusty, don't worry. It's a combination of both. Great. So thank you so much for being with us today. And my first question actually goes back to probably your favorite topic and where your majority of your expertise and experience is. So how does a privacy-centric approach affect your business, retail and e-commerce today? And are you for it? How do you see it? And how do you think marketers can evolve their strategy with the new ecosystem?
Wasn't expecting that question when you said my favorite subject. I thought we were going to talk about my son Henry, but it's fine. Okay, we can talk about this too. So I think there's probably two perspectives I have, right? So selfishly first, I think as a customer, and now as a dad, I think privacy-centric approach is critical, because otherwise as a consumer I don't want to deal with you, right? I think it's probably fair to say that all of us over the last couple of years have become incredibly aware of not just the value of the kind of data that we create and that we share. We've also become aware of the risks of when that trust is abused, right? Some of us maybe had emails from service providers saying, oh, by the way, we accidentally had a data breach and some of your details were leaked, and it just feels horrible, right? It's a little bit like if your photo album from university is suddenly shared with your grandparents, right? It's just this chill that runs down your spine. So I think first as a consumer, I think it's kind of critical, and I think as a business, even if I'm being kind of very kind of like cynical and kind of profit oriented, I think it's so key, given that it's where our consumers are going, right? And if we talk about being customer centric, we have to be able to adapt our businesses, and relate to those values. But also, I think secondly, and this is not the group's public statement, but my personal view is that a lot of companies are pretty bad at this, right? So, when we talk about this in our leadership team as well, like, we're excited about the opportunities to do right in this area because we see it as a competitive differentiator, right? Especially in this region. I moved here from Europe. In Europe, I'm used to being able to unsubscribe from every email and I never get texts, right? Here, I get so many texts, right? And it made me feel popular for about a week, and then I realized that this happens to everybody. But also when I get emails, in most of the cases, I can't even unsubscribe, right? I find that infuriating, right? And I work in the field, right? So I understand the kind of brainless, mindless CRM machine that's behind it. So I can only imagine how frustrating it is for a consumer who maybe doesn't work in this area, doesn't quite understand what's happening, and all they know is that they're being hammered again and again and again by a brand that they don't even remember shopping at, right? So I love that when we talk about being customer-centric, when we talk about one of our core values at Chalhoub being respect, we can actually role model that respect and showcase that through a privacy-centric approach, whether that's the way that we target people online, whether it's the way we communicate with CRM, or even the way that our sales associates engage with customers when they enter our stores.
Absolutely. And how are you, well, obviously from a marketer point of view, how are you managing this right now? Because it obviously changed a lot.
Delicately. Look, I think there's probably a kind of technical approach to it, right? Which talks a lot about how we track things like consent in our data platform. It talks about kind of safeguards and security measures that we put in place to make sure that we segregate data in the appropriate fashion, and we don't grant people who haven't been cleared or explicitly granted consent to use certain data. What's more important, I think, is a process perspective, right? And I think that's really about saying, what kind of journeys do we want to create for our customers, right? And what is it that we need as a group, as an organization, for our brands to make that work, right? So in a case where a brand, for example, says, look, we really want to have that seamless omni-channel journey, right? We want somebody able to shop online and come into a store, and then we want the customer to be able to continue browsing. That obviously means data sharing, right? That means saying, okay, we're going to grant certain people in the store access to transaction records and whatnot. But of course, how you do it is really important, right? If we simply go, listen, here's a bunch of orders from a customer with their address details and credit card details, go fill your boots. That's not great, right? As a customer, and also internally, right, from a process perspective, it's not great. And so, really thinking through how we create these kind of transparent and kind of like very clear processes that help everybody understand what is possible now, but also, how does this kind of like protect and safeguard the interests of our customers. And I should say, obviously Chalhoub, we have more than 300 brands in our portfolio, right? Some of them are own brands like Level and Faces and Tanagra and Trano and Hwali. Some of them franchise brands and also joint ventures. And so, in order for us to maintain credibility with those partners, right, and to remain the partner of choice for luxury in GCC, it's also selfishly very important, that we adhere to these principles, because otherwise, I think very quickly people wouldn't want to work with us anymore.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. And at Snap also, privacy has been the center of our app, and that's why people love Snap from the get-go. So I understand from a consumer point of view, it makes perfect sense. It's just a matter of how do we adapt to the new ecosystem and kind of set up to create these seamless experiences. My second question actually for you is that enhancing experiences through social media, which obviously we are facing these data issues, but also there is so much going on social media, where you can enhance those customer experiences, get those kind of signals of what customers love, how they want to interact with your brand. How do you think this will shape the future of retail? And do you think this will be the fastest growing channel for retailers? And how would you see that playing a role in MENA?
So I think when it comes to MENA, right, there's a number of trends that are interesting, right? I mean, Saudi, I spoke at Leap there last month, and when I was kind of doing my research, right, on the latest consumer numbers, I was astounded to see that more than 80% of the Saudi population is on social media. What really blew my mind is that I realized that was the entire population, right? So including babies and the old folks. And if you actually look at 16 to 64, it's 99.7%. So now, of course, my quest is to meet the 0.3% and be like, how do you survive, right? Like, what are you doing? And then if you look at kind of like average utilization, the average person has something like 10 different social channels, right? Which also, I mean, I have like 3 and I find it difficult. But I think what that says is that you're talking about an audience that's kind of like very mobile centric, very app centric, and I think then, of course, when you look at what that means, coming back to your question, it's one of two things, right? Either as a brand, you need to have a really strong presence, on the social platform, right? You need to make sure that if your audience is very engaged with Snap, that you have the right kind of presence there, right? Be it from a content perspective, be it from an ad engagement perspective, lenses to make sure that you can actually reach them, right, and connect with them in a way that's meaningful to them. Or alternatively, you need to make sure that you've got a really strong app yourself, right, that adds genuine value, right? Because I think sometimes the problem is that people say, oh, mobile is important, we need an app, right? And then you look at the app and it's like a shit version of the website, right? No, it's true, right? And you go, well, why do I want to do this, right? So, the conversation I have a lot with our brands is, okay, if we're going to do an app, how is it going to, be better or different than what you can do, on, for example, your social channels, right? Or on a mobile web experience? Because I agree with you when you're talking about these new affordances, be it, m-commerce, right, and social commerce, be it capabilities, around AR. What's fantastic is that these things are suddenly, becoming much more democratized, right? Whereas before you needed, very expensive kind of feature phones and would only work maybe on iOS, and I'm an Android guy. So that always made me feel sad. Now it's becoming much more kind of like democratized, and so I think there's definitely a huge opportunity there. But how people capture it, I think, has to be a deliberate decision that's made at a brand level.
Absolutely. And I think those seamless experiences, wherever you're doing on social media or your website, kind of has to carry on into that app experience.
Absolutely.
So in line with how you interact with people in the physical store, and things like technologies like Snap kits, camera kits is a great example of that, where for free, basically you can take those assets and provide your users with that try-on experience within your app environment, and then sending them back to Snap or bring them back. So that's kind of removing that friction and really creating a seamless, similar experience you do in all channels. That's the power of social media, and I think there's so much more to it than just creator content. Or my favorite question, obviously, augmented reality. It's a talk of the day. Everyone talks about it, but everyone's still struggling how to adopt to it. What does it mean for their business? We talked about some real results, try-ons driving actual sales, or try-ons driving actual consideration or less return, so more in a sustainable kind of business form that augmented reality can support. How do you see it for your business, and what do you think, how is that going to shape the way that you connect with the consumers?
That's a hell of a question. I feel like I need a card as well so I can keep track of what I'm going to say. Okay. So I'd say when you look at the kind of the end-to-end journey, right, of kind of like e-commerce, and I fully appreciate, right, the whole AIDA thing, the whole funnel model is kind of dead, and people jump from all different kinds of stages to another. Fine, but bear with me, right, for the sake of this example. I think AR can play a number of different roles, and I think again where customers are going to be successful and brands are going to be successful is where they consciously make choices to activate that capability at a particular stage, right? So I'll give you an example. We have a brand, Tanagra, does phenomenal home goods. I mean, it's amazing craftsmanship, but of course, by the very definition, these are very exclusive goods, right? And this includes like dome vases, and they're like $50,000. So we don't exactly have a stack of them lying in the back room. Now, obviously, if you're the kind of customer, who's interested in kind of purchasing those kind of products, you're not just going to go on an app and be like, oh, cool, $50,000 vase, click buy, right? I mean, even in luxury space, that doesn't really tend to happen. But what's interesting is if you look at a store, right, that sometimes does indeed happen in a store, right, where somebody walks in, they see a very expensive object, and they go, oh God, I love it, yeah, I must have this done. So what's the difference? And of course, the difference is that in the one scenario, there's this kind of tangible reality, right? Where they can see the product, they can, assess how it would, feel in their home. And in the other, they're just looking at a picture on an app. And so by, using, AR capabilities, we can say, you know what? Let's actually bring that shopping experience, into your home, right? You don't need to spend $50,000, for you to see what this would look like. Right? I mean, I love their fresheners, Chalhoub. I mean, absolutely amazing brand. Luckily, not $50,000, more like $50 or $100. But one of the things that I remember worrying about, 2 years ago when I bought my first one of them online on Tanagra was which size should I get, right, for a table? Because they're always just a square, right? Depending on what the volume is, it just looks the same. And all of a sudden with HR is also important, that's a different conversation. But all of a sudden with AR, you can say, okay, well, let me just actually place it on the table and see what would look sensible, right? So I think that stuff's really important. And that, of course, also helps build credibility. If you're someone who's never bought online before, hey, am I really going to get a real product? Is this actually something, that this person is truly selling? AR helps build that trust. So there's a whole bunch of stuff at the beginning. Then when it comes to the actual kind of conversion piece, and we're not here yet, but obviously when you talk about things like kind of customization and stuff, there's a whole bunch of possibilities there, right? So something that I'm really kind of keen to work on is that for products that allow personalization, engraving, for us to say, okay, well, can we actually demonstrate what it would look like, right? As opposed to just, type your engraving request here or personalization request here, and you get your product and you're like, this looks terrible. It's not at all what I wanted, right? So, making that kind of checkout process more seamless, and again removing those points of friction. And I think finally, when it comes to kind of the operational aspect as well, if you're talking about the current challenges either around like delivery or returns, there's a whole opportunity there as well, right? One, if you allow people to be it kind of like for example try on shoes or let them experience a product beforehand, they're much less likely to actually return it, right? Which has a great environmental impact as well. But also then when it comes to people being kind of like excited to kind of like share or show off their product, right? The ability you can say, hey, by the way, for example, here's an AR version of your product. You can go and you can just already show it to people. You can get people excited by it. I think is really is really exciting. And so yeah, I think there's a huge amount of opportunity here. We're really just kind of scratching the surface, especially since I'm not a content and creative guy, right? So my examples I think are quite dull and mundane, but I know there's some very talented creatives in the audience. So I think the sky's the limit with this kind of stuff.
Absolutely, and yesterday we had a good chat about this as well, because Evan Spiegel our CEO was in town, and obviously he's very passionate about AR. He thinks this is a space where Snapchat will really create a completely different experience for consumers, and already is doing. And one of the things, the problems that came up was the luxury, the fact that luxury items is great, makes sense. The plate's not going to break on AR, so it's a great way to look at that in your table setting and really choose the right color, or it's more sustainable, makes sense for a luxury item. But a lot of our mass sort of retailers who cater to mass audiences or have, I guess, lower margin items, or fashion, beauty, etc. It is not as scalable for them, and he was mentioning the fact that with the technology that's coming in an AR space, for example, we have acquired somewhere around 4 to 5 large AR companies over the past year, just to be able to democratize AR for all sorts of businesses at the cheapest, most efficient possible way, and really try to make sure that that's becoming a day-to-day consumer experience and is accessible to everyone. Some of these companies create 3D objects. So you literally can point your camera with the app, create a 3D object of anything, really, clothes, fashion, makeup, shoes, and upload it into that sort of AR platform or interface we have, and then scale it either within your app or outside of on Snapchat or elsewhere. So reality is just the interface is there and accessible, and as the technology progresses, it could be mass and cater all sorts of need at a very kind of short period of time or resources. So it's a very exciting space, and I think luxury already nailing some of that anyways, because again, your craft and the beauty of the product, and it just makes sense in terms of ROI. We've seen incredible ROI previously with some of the Chalhoub brands as well. But yeah, I'm excited to see that scaling up. In terms of the building brand legacy, I know Chalhoub is probably one of the oldest luxury groups in the region, dominant in terms of the luxury and customer loving the brands and trusting. So trust is important, but also legacy can fade away if you just don't catch up with what consumer demand, and that's the reality, especially with Gen Z and millennials. We all struggle that they really, unless you have a purpose and relevant to them, they don't care about legacy, which is fair. So how are you dealing with this landscape right now? Because I know a lot of cross-border brands are coming to Rooijen. It's all becoming more accessible, and with the change and the behavior change that's happening, how do you catch up to make sure that you keep that loyalty and legacy in the market?
Wow, that's a heavy question. I think there's an important question which you asked, right? Which is how do you build truly sustainable businesses, right? And how do you do it in a environment that's quite volatile, right? And subject to a lot of change, both from economic perspective as well as kind of socio-demographic perspective. And I think there's a couple of things that come into it. I think one, it kind of begins and ends usually, if done badly, with kind of values, right? Like, what do you stand for as an organization, right? And I think particularly now, consumers are becoming so much more, I think, aware of the values of the brands that they're shopping with, right? Whereas before it was a case of, I want this product, I don't really care who makes it, I just want this product. It was very kind of purely about consuming. I think now it's shifted much more to experiencing, right? So you hear this often with luxury. People say, why would you spend 2 or 3 times the amount you could for a pair of trainers just to get this pair of trainers? And the answer is, well, because that pair of trainers is made in some workshop somewhere, whereas this was hand stitched by artisans in Milan or wherever else, right? There's a certain story and a certain heritage that comes with it. And so I think, as a group, when we talk about, kind of our values, right, respect, excellence, entrepreneurial spirit, these aren't just words, right? It's very much something that we try to imbue in everything we do, because we know that, whatever changes, our kind of like core customer base, right, our tribe, if you will, it's unlike that all of a sudden they're going to turn around and go, actually, we don't care about respect and excellence. Like, screw these guys, right? We're going to go shop somewhere else. Like, no, like that's going to be really key. That said, obviously, the values alone won't save you if you're kind of like your product or service, doesn't have a value proposition, right? If you're not actually, creating value in some way. And so I think for us, and this is very much how we look at our brands as well. We try to say, where, is the market going, right? Or how are consumer habits evolving, and how do we, keep up with those consumers, right? And then, of course, not just as a short sprint, but really in the long run, right? As a marathon, or longer. And so, for example, we just added guests to our portfolio, right? We're really got some really exciting plans, particularly focused on Saudi Arabia, and that's because we know that from a consumer perspective, Guess is a very appealing brand, for kind of like a lot of the, especially younger Saudis. So it's like, okay, great, then let's actually work with this brand, right? And let's build these experiences. Similarly, of course, when it comes to the expectations, I mean, you already mentioned the changes in media consumption behavior, but even when it comes to things like the delivery experience, right? It's very much changing. And so, when it comes to our brands like Level and Faces, we really we make significant efforts and investments to make sure that the kind of capabilities that we're putting in place and the kind of experiences that we can provide at the end of the day are those that our consumer either expects or is going to expect in the near future. Because I think nothing is worse, I think than arrogance, right? And that line, "I am Ozymandias, King of Kings," it's from a poem called Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley, and it's a poem about the price of arrogance, right? If you say I'm the greatest, right, and we're fantastic, that's a very quick way of running your business into the ground, right, or into the sand in this part of the world. And so I think having that humility to constantly, be aware of the changes, right, to constantly listen, and also I think to be constantly willing to kind of like reinvent yourself, right, and I don't mean just on a personal, spiritual level. I mean as an organization, I think is incredibly important. And of course, having the right partners to help you through those changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in line with your, also I think consistently and connection, a proper connection, that you don't really forget that connection existence. So on social platforms, we always talk about, your consumer and your community is there. How are you engaging with them? What are you saying to them? How do you add value to them? And how consistent and kind of always on you are, I think is really important, because you can't just do burst and seasonal things and just assume that they will always come back.
Yeah, look, I mean, you probably knew people like that in college, right? That would just show up for like the one party you threw, and you were like, "What the hell?" Right? I don't want to be your friend, right? And sometimes I feel it's the same way with brands, right? Where just before like Eid or Black Friday, I get a bunch of things. It's like, "Ryan, beloved customer," and I'm like, "You just want me for my house party." So it's important to have that sustained relationship, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. Honestly, always a pleasure having a conversation with you. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Honestly, really appreciate your time, and just wanted to let you all know that we can go to the next. Oh, there you go. We have a very exciting installation. So this was our little B2B area. Let's go to the B2C and what's happening in the B2C world of Snapchat. But Cyril Leslin, I'm very sorry if I don't say it right, it's a very French name, basically, he's one of the very famous world artists that have done an art installation in a shape and pattern and geometry of Arabic tradition at Al Fursan Park. And he has worked with Ahmed Ali, one of our AR stars, to be able to create a very immersive experience within that installation. So we would like you to go and have a look at this installation and really experience Snap for yourself. Hopefully you will be impressed. And the buggies will be downstairs. So please go ahead and have some refreshers. There's no rush. We have 10-15 minutes here, but the buggies will be waiting for you downstairs to take you to the installation. I know it's a bit hot, so please hydrate and take some water with you as well. Thank you so much.